Hello! Today we're going to have a look at one of PhpStorm's features, which makes it a little bit easier to debug things where you have also a large framework, for example, that sometimes get in the way of doing debugging. So let's demonstrate what we can do about this. Right here I have opened a file in Xdebug.org's website where I want to debug how a specific news item gets shown. I have therefore set up a breakpoint at the first line in this method. Let me switch to the web browser so that we can request a page with such a news item. It is already loaded, so we'll press Ctrl R on the keyboard to reload this page. And as you can see, it stops immediately at the right line. Now what I simply want to do is step through all of these items here and then see what the return value is. As you might remember from a previous video, Xdebug 3.2 has return value debugging. So let me just step over these lines. Now what I want to really see is what this news item constructor does. For that I will have to click Step Into. But now, instead of going into the constructor of this class, I end up in the Composer autoloader, which is not really what I wanted to do, so I click now Step Out to get to the calling function and continue. So I'm back here again, so I guess I have to press Step Into again. And again I get this load class. This time it is for news item. Again, I'm not interested in that, so I'll have to step out of this function and now try once more to step into this to see whether we actually end up in a constructor. And then finally we end up in a constructor of news item, which isn't particularly interesting, but let's skip through it anyway. And now we end up in the constructor of HTML response, which is also what we wanted to see because these were wrapped. Now after we've run news controller item with the render method, we can now see the return value of this method. In this case, what it will have is a title, a date, which will have parsed from the file, as well as the contents of this news item. From here on, I can of course now continue running the script. Now this isn't particularly very useful to have, so let's now enable file skipping in PhpStorm to make this handier to debug. For that I'm going to File, Settings, and then under PHP Debug there is a Step Filters option. In here I can set up a few filters, but what we're really interested in is skipping some files. So I'll click on Add here, click on the Browse icon and select the right directory. In this case, I don't want to see any of vendor, which includes the Composer autoloader. So I'll just select vendor and click OK. And then I'll click OK here to accept this new setting. Alright, let me re-request the file in the browser to see what happens this time. I press Ctrl R again, and of course we expect to stop at the same breakpoint. So let me just skip over the first few lines. And now I would expect that when I step into this line, I will not end up in the autoloader. Unfortunately, that didn't happen and we're still there. Now, I was scratching my head a little bit around this, and it turns out that this is sort of expected. I am using the built-in PHP web server, which apparently means that step filters are not applied. It says so right here in the documentation. So what do I do now? Luckily, the development environment also had a Docker container where it will use light HTTP because that's what I use in production. Let's see what I have set up here. This is just a standard Docker Compose file that I've used all the time, also in previous videos. Which should mean that I can just start Docker Compose and then run the debugger again, and then it should work. Let's see if I can make that work. I now run Docker Compose up. It seems like I need to make a directory first. And let me try again. Okay, I shall just remove that container. Because I don't particularly care. And three times lucky? I think I remember what the port was, which I think was 8123. Of course, we'll have to then change that in the browser when I request a page. And as soon as I request this, I end up here with my breakpoint again. Now let's see if this works if I step over things. Moment of truth. And it steps out of something. Let me step once more. I think what happens is that it hadn't quite realized that the return value debugging was sort of skipped here. And if you include a file, at the end of the file, PHP always does an implicit return. I think I'll be filing a bug report for that. In any case, we did now not see the autoloader method ourselves, which is what we expected and wanted. And the same here, I still see no sign of the autoload method. I will now click Resume Program to go to the end of the request. And then of course in a browser we have our file rendered. So after our initial troubles, because step filters are not applied on the command line, I've managed to make this now work. I hope you also find this feature of PhpStorm useful, where you can ignore either files or whole directories of frameworks. If you enjoyed this and or learned something, please click like and subscribe.